The courtroom was filled with anticipation. Journalists lined the benches, their cameras ready to capture every moment. At the center of the storm sat Justice Amy Coney Barrett, her eyes sharp and unyielding. She was known for her decisive manner, and today, she wasn't holding back. Across from her stood Representative Jasmine Crockett, a figure who had become a rising star in political debates. Her reputation was built on fiery comebacks and razor-sharp logic. She had entered this hearing knowing that Barrett would test her patience, but what she didn't expect was how personal the clash would become. Barrett leaned forward, her tone cool but edged with challenge. "Representative Crockett, your arguments lack the foundation of real judicial precedent. Are you here to argue law or to make noise?" The room went silent. Reporters froze in place, waiting for Crockett's reply. Everyone knew this was the kind of moment that could decide the narrative for weeks to come. Crockett took a slow breath, steadying herself. She had been underestimated before, always dismissed until her voice cut through louder than anyone else's. And this was about to be no different. Jasmine Crockett rose to her feet with calm precision, her gaze fixed on Justice Barrett. She let the silence stretch just long enough to remind the room that she wasn't rattled. "Noise?" Crockett repeated, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of fire. "With all due respect, Justice Barrett, when I speak, it's not noise, it's accountability." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing the energy shift. Barrett's lips tightened, but she didn't interrupt. Crockett pressed forward. "You sit on the bench interpreting precedent," she continued, "but precedent was built by people who had the courage to challenge the status quo. If questioning power and demanding answers is noise, then I'll proudly keep making it." The audience murmured. Some even nodded. The balance of power was shifting, and Barrett knew it. She leaned back, clearly unsettled by the confidence in Crockett's tone. For the first time that day, it wasn't Barrett setting the pace, it was Crockett. And everyone in the courtroom felt the tide turning. Justice Barrett narrowed her eyes, determined not to let the moment slip away. She leaned forward, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Representative Crockett, passion does not replace the law. You can fill this room with rhetoric, but that doesn't change the framework we are bound to follow." The words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, it seemed like Barrett had regained control. The courtroom shifted uncomfortably, waiting to see if Crockett would retreat. But Crockett didn't move. She simply clasped her hands in front of her, her expression sharp yet calm. Then she struck. "Justice Barrett," she said slowly, "the law is not a cage, it's a promise. And when those promises are broken, when the law is twisted to serve the powerful instead of protecting the people, then yes, passion becomes necessary. Because passion is what forces this nation to confront its failures." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the cameras seemed to lean closer. Barrett's brow furrowed, and for the first time, she looked less like the unshakable judge and more like someone caught in a storm she didn't anticipate. The courtroom wasn't just listening now, they were hanging on every word Jasmine Crockett spoke. Justice Barrett straightened in her chair, clearly unsettled but unwilling to concede. Her voice grew sharper. "So, Representative Crockett, are you suggesting that emotion should dictate the course of justice? That fiery speeches should replace judicial reasoning?" She delivered the question with a smugness that made a few in the courtroom nod cautiously in agreement. Barrett thought she had cornered Crockett. But Crockett's eyes lit up. She didn't miss a beat. "No," Crockett replied firmly. "What I'm suggesting is that justice without humanity is nothing but cold bureaucracy. The law was written to serve the people, not the other way around. And if those who interpret it forget the human cost, then justice becomes injustice dressed in robes." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even some of the legal scholars in the audience whispered among themselves. Cameras zoomed in on Barrett's face, capturing the flicker of irritation, and maybe even doubt, that crossed her expression. Crockett stepped closer, her voice rising just enough to command the entire chamber. You can dismiss my words as noise. You can call it emotion. But history has proven that it's those willing to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable, who push this country closer to the ideals it claims to stand for. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Barrett gripped her pen, tapping it against the desk as though trying to maintain composure. For the first time, it looked as if she wasn't the one in control of the courtroom anymore. The tension in the room was electric. Every camera light seemed to burn brighter, every pen scratched faster across notepads. Justice Barrett, clearly aware that she was losing the upper hand, tried to reassert control. "Representative Crockett," Barrett said, her tone clipped, "you are not here to lecture the court. You are here to provide facts and legal argumentation. If you cannot do that, then this entire appearance risks becoming a spectacle." The word spectacle hit like a challenge. Some in the room shifted uncomfortably, as though Crockett had been diminished to nothing more than a performer. But Crockett's lips curved into the faintest smile. She was ready. "A spectacle," she repeated, tilting her head slightly. "If demanding accountability is a spectacle, then maybe this courtroom has forgotten who it serves." The audience erupted in a low rumble. Crockett's voice grew stronger. "You see, Justice Barrett, the true spectacle isn't me standing here and refusing to be silenced. The real spectacle is when courts ignore the people who put their faith in them. When fairness is treated like an inconvenience. That's the performance the world is tired of watching." Reporters nearly fell over each other trying to capture every word. Barrett's jaw tightened, her pen now motionless. It was no longer just a courtroom hearing. It was becoming a national moment, and Jasmine Crockett was at the center of it. Barrett shifted uncomfortably, though she tried to mask it with a faint smile. She leaned in, her voice carrying a sharper edge. "Representative Crockett, you speak of accountability, but accountability must be grounded in the Constitution, not theatrics. Do you believe your words today hold constitutional weight, or are they simply designed for headlines?" The courtroom froze. It was a jab meant to undermine Crockett, to paint her as a politician chasing cameras instead of justice. But Crockett didn't flinch. She slowly turned toward the press gallery, then back to Barrett, her expression unwavering. "My words are for the record," she said firmly, "but they're also for the people who can't sit in this courtroom, the ones whose lives are shaped by the decisions made here. You call it headlines. I call it transparency." A murmur of approval swept the room. Crockett's voice gained strength. The Constitution was written by people who wanted accountability, who wanted to make sure no one, no judge, no politician, no powerful figure, could rise above the law. If I speak loudly, it's because too many have been ignored when they spoke softly. Barrett's faint smile faltered. For the first time, she didn't immediately have a rebuttal. The audience leaned in. This wasn't just a clash, it was turning into a reckoning. Justice Barrett tapped her pen against the desk, her voice carrying a hint of irritation. "Representative Crockett, you cloak yourself in ideals, but ideals don't win cases. Evidence does. Precedent does. The Constitution does. If you believe you can bend the law with passion alone, you are mistaken." The line was sharp, decisive, Barrett's attempt to regain control. Some nodded in agreement, believing she had found solid footing again. But Crockett leaned forward, her tone calm yet fierce. "You're right about one thing, Justice Barrett. Evidence matters. And so does precedent. But let's not pretend precedent has always been noble. History is littered with cases where precedent upheld injustice instead of fighting it. Evidence was ignored when it was inconvenient. And the Constitution itself has been twisted by those who claim to defend it." Gasps filled the room. Crockett's words had cut directly at the core of Barrett's argument. "Precedent is not sacred if it perpetuates harm," Crockett continued. "Evidence means nothing if it is silenced or buried. And the Constitution loses its power when it's used as a shield for those who fear accountability." The room was now electric, every eye on Crockett, every camera flashing. Barrett's lips pressed into a thin line. She hadn't expected Crockett to strike so forcefully at the very foundation of her challenge. And yet, Crockett wasn't finished. She had more to say, and everyone in that courtroom could feel it. Barrett adjusted her robe, her composure visibly strained. She tried to deliver her next line with authority, though the edge in her tone betrayed her frustration. So tell me, Representative Crockett, if precedent, evidence, and the Constitution are not enough, then what is? What gives you the authority to stand here and challenge the very pillars of this institution? It was the question everyone had been waiting for, the attempt to corner Crockett once and for all. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She straightened her shoulders, her voice rising with a conviction that carried through every corner of the courtroom. What gives me the authority, she repeated. The same thing that gives any citizen authority, the promise that this nation belongs to all of us, not just a select few sitting on benches or in high offices. The Constitution doesn't belong to you, Justice Barrett. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the people. The audience erupted in murmurs, some even clapping before being hushed by court officials. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing Barrett's flicker of unease. Crockett leaned forward, her words cutting through the silence. The pillars of this institution are not marble columns or centuries-old rulings. They are the voices of the people demanding fairness, justice, and truth. Without that, all of this, she gestured around the courtroom, is just theater. The room went still. Barrett's jaw clenched, but she had no immediate response. For the first time, the judge who prided herself on control seemed shaken, and Jasmine Crockett was standing taller than ever. Justice Barrett's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping to a colder, sharper tone. Representative Crockett, do not mistake this chamber for a campaign stage. The law demands respect, not fiery speeches designed to stir the public. Her words were measured, but the tension in her delivery revealed the cracks forming beneath her calm exterior. She wanted control back, needed it. But Crockett, unwavering, met her gaze head-on. Respect, she said firmly. Respect is earned when institutions uphold justice, not when they hide behind procedure to avoid accountability. If the public is stirred, it's because they're finally hearing the truth spoken in a place that too often silences it. The room trembled with a murmur of approval. Even those who had entered the chamber skeptical of Crockett were now leaning forward, captivated. Barrett tried to interject, but Crockett pressed on, her voice gaining strength. You say this is not a campaign stage. You're right, it's far more important than that. Campaigns come and go. But the decisions made here define lives, shape futures, and write history. If that's not worth passion, then what is? For a brief moment, Barrett sat frozen, her lips parted as though searching for the right response. Cameras zoomed in, catching the rare image of a Supreme Court justice visibly unsettled. The courtroom wasn't just witnessing a clash, it was witnessing a shift. Jasmine Crockett was no longer merely defending herself. She was redefining the ground they were standing on. The silence in the chamber felt heavier than the marble columns surrounding it. Justice Barrett's pen tapped once against the desk before she finally spoke again, her words deliberate. You speak with conviction, Representative Crockett. But conviction is not law. If we allowed passion to guide rulings, this institution would crumble. Stability requires restraint. It sounded strong, but her tone betrayed a trace of defensiveness. She was trying to reclaim her ground, to remind everyone of the authority her robe carried. Crockett, however, seized the moment. She stepped forward, her voice steady, echoing through the room. Restraint is not the same as silence. Stability is not the same as complacency. Justice Barrett, stability without justice is just stagnation dressed in authority. The words cut deep, and the audience gasped. Reporters' pens flew across notepads, capturing every syllable. Crockett continued, her voice rising with a fiery certainty. You want to talk about stability? Tell that to the families waiting years for fairness that never comes. Tell it to the people who see their voices dismissed because precedent says they should wait another generation. Stability means nothing if it comes at the expense of justice. Barrett shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, she seemed to realize that every rebuttal she offered only gave Crockett more room to shine. And now, Crockett had the entire courtroom listening to her, hanging on her every word. Justice Barrett leaned back in her chair, folding her hands as though retreating into authority. Her eyes swept the room before landing back on Crockett. "Representative Crockett," she said, her tone sharpened but less certain than before, "your words resonate with emotion, but emotion does not safeguard the rule of law. If we dismantle precedent every time someone calls it unjust, we risk chaos. Do you truly believe society can withstand such instability?" It was her last card, framing Crockett's passion as dangerous, reckless. Some in the gallery nodded, wondering if Barrett had finally found the ground to stand on. But Crockett stepped closer, her voice low at first, then rising like a wave. "Chaos doesn't come from change, Justice Barrett. Chaos comes from refusing to change when justice demands it. The law is not meant to be a fortress protecting the powerful, it's supposed to be a bridge that serves the people." The audience erupted in murmurs, louder this time, almost impossible to contain. Cameras clicked non-stop. Crockett's eyes locked with Barrett's. Stability without fairness isn't stability, it's oppression disguised as order. And history shows us that when people are denied justice long enough, the real chaos begins. The weight of her words hit the room like thunder. Barrett's face tightened, but she didn't reply. She couldn't. Because everyone in that courtroom knew, Crockett had just flipped the entire argument on its head. The air was thick, the silence almost unbearable. Justice Barrett's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Her pen, once a weapon tapping rhythmically to assert control, now lay still against the desk. Jasmine Crockett seized the pause. She raised her chin, her voice steady but pulsing with authority. "You see, Justice Barrett, the courtroom is not sacred because of the robes, or the rituals, or the titles. It's sacred because the people place their trust here. Break that trust, and the marble crumbles faster than you can imagine." A murmur swept through the audience, some nodding, others whispering furiously. Even the reporters, seasoned to keep their composure, looked stunned by the clarity of Crockett's words. Crockett didn't stop there. "The law evolves because people evolve. The Constitution wasn't written to freeze time, it was written to guide us as we move forward. To ignore that truth is to betray the very spirit of justice itself." Barrett shifted, her composure visibly cracking. Her eyes betrayed a flicker of something she hadn't shown before, uncertainty. And in that moment, it was clear to everyone, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just holding her ground. She was reshaping the very stage Justice Barrett thought she controlled. Justice Barrett exhaled slowly, her grip tightening around her pen. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but the weight of the room pressed against her. Every eye was on her, yet it was Jasmine Crockett who commanded the space. Crockett took one final step forward, her voice calm, unwavering, and unforgettable. "Justice isn't measured by how loudly the powerful speak, it's measured by whether the powerless are finally heard. Today, this courtroom has heard them. And no amount of precedent or polished rhetoric can silence that truth." The words echoed like thunder. Reporters' cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing Barrett's silence, Crockett's poise, and the stunned expressions across the courtroom. Barrett shifted in her seat, unable to muster a reply that would not sound hollow. The silence was deafening, yet it was the silence of defeat. The judge who had entered the day expecting to lecture Jasmine Crockett now sat visibly shaken, while Crockett stood tall, her fiery comeback transforming the very tone of the hearing. And just like that, the entire courtroom knew, the clash had ended, and it was Jasmine Crockett who had changed everything. The headlines would write themselves.